When we come together, change can happen. Respect our culture, respect us as humans.
So I've recently come back from my business trip from South Africa, and a lot of you probably know a lot of interesting things have happened while I was gone.
For the sake of just keeping things civil and actually just having a very much needed intellectual constructive conversation, I really don't want anybody tagging anybody and mentioning any names because this is not about this particular individual. Like the topic that we're here to discuss is much bigger than one person. A few weeks ago, this particular individual went on a family trip to Namibia, but on arrival in Namibia, most of her stories was referencing Africa. Africa, oh, I could get a SIM card in Africa, I could get flip-flops in Africa, look at this tiny place in Africa. And that obviously was the start of my, okay, let us not continue with the stereotype that Africa is a country. It's a continent. And the reason why that even started bothering me from then was because I know the audience that follow her. Yeah. She's coming from the United States.
Right.
We're talking about a country where the president is referring to certain countries as countries. So having your following see all of that is a bit like, okay, maybe I should tell you that this is not right. So I reached out to her, but that was separate. The thing that kind of made everything blow out was when she had posted on her Instagram feed a picture of her lifting a half-naked baby. And in that photo, there was about 6 or 7 other babies there. Secondly was the caption. It started off with, look at the cute smiles on their faces, which we know it's a typical pattern, right?
Right, yeah.
So, their cute smiles and the faces, I wish I could adopt all of them. But then to kind of make that even worse was her story.
Right,
about the 15-second clip where she was lifting individually all of these half-naked children, not hugging anyone close, like lifting them. She lifted about 3, dust her arms, she looks at the camera, and I suppose her partner is still recording. She goes on. The cover song for that was All Africa. It's like literally so cliche. I reached out to her because it is a thing that there is the stereotype about, the often poverty-stricken children in Africa.
Of course, yeah.
And you're in one country, Namibia. So I reached out anyway to say it's really ignorant for you to be doing this.
And to be fair, you reached out privately.
I reached out privately.
That's very important, I think. You didn't immediately share anything, or it was all private at the time.
It was all private. In that first message I sent to her, I said to her, please kindly take down this post because you're perpetuating the stereotype, and I know your audience. Eventually she stopped responding to me, sent her manager, which of course I don't know if it was really her manager or her, because this is someone I was chatting to. All of a sudden it's like, oh, she so and so is gonna get back to you to address your concerns. I'm like, I'm looking at your post, is gathering more likes and more comments and more engagement and very stereotypical comments. I was like, no, the longer that I wait, and I know because of the engagement, there's going to be a refusal to take down this post.
Right.
I'm going to, address it on my platform because I can. So after I did, there was the whole backlash, and then the post went down.
Right.
After I'd done that, then obviously she then received a lot of negativity, but mostly constructive criticism, I would say. She received a lot of constructive criticism from fellow Africans who understood the negative impact of that post. And she eventually took it down. Then the conversation about white saviorism came up, and till today, it's very much a debate within both platforms to an extent. Right. But I know that it's a global issue. It's not the issue of just these two influencers going at each other. It's a thing. And I know, of course, when there's a very serious topic like this and someone shows even the little bit of emotion, I'm tagged the angry black woman. I mean, you and I discussed it, and we know that it's important to bring up this conversation, especially as a white man. So we would very much, and by we, I speak for all of us.
Oh, do you now? Yeah? All of us who? Who is us?
My comrades. We would very much love to hear the take on what you think from your experience of working in Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, obviously when I saw that, I actually got back from work that day, I was in Lagos, I think. Yeah, I was in Lagos, in Nigeria, and actually got back and kind of, realized obviously there was something happening. I went through it. And on the one hand, I wasn't surprised, right? Because as you said as well, this is still very much widespread, sometimes more obvious and sometimes more subtle, of course. But I was equally surprised as well by, to be fair though, still the ignorance in the response. Because I think, one thing that you said that really for me encapsulated everything that is crucial about what happened was, it's one thing to be ignorant, but it's another thing to then be educated or told differently and then remain ignorant. And that for me was the painful thing about it, right? But I'm very, very happy as well. It's certainly something that as you said as before, I've worked and lived in many different African countries and actually in South America as well. And I've come across a lot of those instances myself. So yeah, very happy to share a few maybe thoughts, experiences, and answer you guys' question, your comrades' question.
Okay, I think what I'd like to address is, as a white tourist in Africa,
right,
the things that are acceptable and the things that are just blatant exploitation of people.
Yeah.
And two is even when you go to volunteer.
Yeah. I've actually done volunteerism myself. I've volunteered in Africa, and I've actually founded and for many years run an organization that till today exists in Germany that, as part of many other things, also offers actually for young Germans to go abroad, predominantly to Africa, right? So I think that from that perspective, I can really speak from a lot of different angles here and give you an insight, right?
Yeah.
So I think, why do people predominantly from the West, why is it such a big thing, right, to go to Africa to volunteer?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, everything starts with the way Africa is portrayed in the media. For anybody, especially if you're talking about because mostly these are younger folks, right? Yeah. Most of the times, at least, either in their late teens or early 20s, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of them, obviously, will definitely be the first time coming to the continent, right? So they have an opportunity. They made a decision. Maybe I want to take a gap year. I want to do something for a year. They decided to volunteer, and then they chose Africa, right? And the very, very first impressions and ideas that I think all of us have of other places in the world that we haven't gone to can only come from media. From whether it's newspaper, radio, TV, YouTube, or online, of course, nowadays, right? Social media is now probably for the now youth is probably the main source. Okay. So that's kind of where the initial, interests or thoughts are coming from. Okay. And of course, we all know, I think, or hopefully at least, unfortunately, in most of the Western media, you still mostly hear a lot of the negative stories. Most documentaries are about the problems, the poverty, which, there's no denying it, but that's not all what it's about, right? So of course it exists. Of course, there are a lot of challenges, health, social, economic challenges, but that's what most of the media focuses on. Or when elections go wrong, they will all be there in the mass of the chaos and demonstrations, but when they're fairly peaceful elections, you don't see any reporter running on the street, oh my God, there's nothing happening here, it's all quiet, everybody is happy, a peaceful election. So I think that's where it really starts from. Okay,
and by asking you that question, I just want to put it out there that I am not against anybody for coming from the West to volunteer in Africa. It's my home.
Sure.
The more people go, the better I can get, right?
Right.
I personally, having found medics abroad, predominantly what we do is create work experience specifically for healthcare professionals to go and volunteer in Africa.
Right.
Now, I've done that because that is my continent, so I have no problem with that. And I think voluntary work is good. Humanitarian aid is great. The problem specifically is when you arrive there, the way that you behave.
Absolutely.
Your attitude is the breaking point. In light of everything that's happened, I've actually gotten legitimate questions from white people saying, so what pictures are okay to post?
In my case, for example, I was working in a project, of course, in a certain setup with kids on a long-term basis. I was, engaging with them, of course. And of course, over time, I took different kind of pictures with the different children there, right?
You lived there for a year.
Exactly. They weren't complete strangers. It's just do it the same way you would do it, let's say, if you're back in your own country. You wouldn't go into somebody's house there and just start taking pictures. You wouldn't take from like 50 meters away pictures of random families or random children running around on the playground. You know, the police would probably come and stop you and asking you why you're taking pictures of random children. Okay. So that's what I say. Like, it's all about the context.
Yeah.
And it's about, how you behave.
Yeah. Okay. So what I've gathered from what you've said is the justification of that would be, well, you're there to volunteer. You have more than one encounter with said community. And at some point you foster friendships, you foster relationships.
Exactly. It was more friends at the time.
And then you take the picture. The context as well is in what way you portray when you then put it on social media.
I was actually going to say that as well. Of course, in my time, I mean, this is now well over 10 years ago, by the way, a long time or more actually now, well more. Of course, social media didn't really exist. So there's nothing like posting anywhere. Right? And of course, in the world of social media, it's one thing is the image itself, but another very, very important aspect, is actually then what you write under it, the caption. Very important. Honestly, it can make or break almost whether something is acceptable or not, right? There are some images that are straight up not acceptable, regardless of what you write, okay?
Yeah.
But there are a lot of images I feel, where it really depends on what you write and how you present it, basically, I would say.
Well, let's go deeper into white saviorism. And I just want to read out the Wikipedia definition of white saviorism.
Of course.
The term white savior, sometimes combined with savior complex to write white savior complex, refers to a white person who acts to help non-white people with the help in some context perceived to be self-serving. The term has been associated with Africa, and certain characters in film and television have been critiqued as white savior figures. Please read up on that, and so that people can start to understand why some of us who are well informed are upset. Because if you go there with the intention of self-serving and you then take up all these pictures, you are first of all exploiting people, and then secondly and most dangerously, your images, when you put them on social media, are perpetuating that negative stereotype, because that's not all we want to be known for as a continent.
I think it is still, even till today, commendable for somebody to take out a year of their life and go wherever in the world. For the individuals who are doing this is, in my case, by the way, as well, an absolutely life-changing experience. I mean, I've this, of course, and I always said this, I was 19 at the time. This was my year. I spent it in South Africa, by the way, in Durban, close to Durban. That year I spent in Durban was absolutely life-changing for me. From a lot of negatives, of course. I mean, in terms of negative, I mean like really heartbreaking things that I have seen that I've never seen before in my life. Obviously, living up protected in Germany, right? And of course, equally incredibly positive moments that I till today. And some of my best friends, at least that I emotionally value the most, actually are from that time. I remember Sia, the guy who came to our wedding to sing, for example. I'm glad today, of course, and again, this was pre-social media, but that I have, of course, a lot of pictures of places, of people that I've seen and visit, right?
And the children that you took care of.
Of course, yeah. And I'm not saying that I didn't take some pictures maybe where I was, in the car of a certain setting or something that I just found very, impressive in the sense that it was shocking sometimes, but I wanted to capture it for myself. Some of my pictures as well with some friends in front of their houses that you could label as a mud house, right? But for example, for me, no matter the situation I was in or whatever I captured, it was around like I was impressed and I was honored to be there, right? And I would rather talk about, for example, this sort of very strong, and uplifting personalities these guys were, how incredibly, they've embraced me. Again, they're always asking me to come and visit them, stay with them over the weekend. I usually would talk about when I tell people stories around this, like, as I said, Siyabonga, again, my very good friend till today, is a great example. I could show you many, many pictures that, again, somebody would say, oh my God, that's... But for me, the background to this is like how, again, he embraced me. He was keen to teach me. I've learned so much from Siyabonga, right? In many regards. This guy was just the kindest person. Did not have to do this, but really took me in, had a keen interest in showing me his whole family. And so that's how I would portray it. Whatever the picture is, it's about the warmth of the people, about the resilience, about creativity, there's so many positive elements, what I mean? That regardless of what's the setup, you can still portray it in a human way, basically.
In a human way.
I think that's the key. The definition of white saviorism for me honestly, that sentence, when I read this, that's where it broke for me, honestly, about this, oh, I wish I could adopt them all. This idea, you know, of again, mostly white people, that, you know, they can just go and adopt as many people in Africa because they're all poor children.
Yeah.
You know, that is really, I mean, that portrays the definition almost of this sort of white, you know, saviorism thinking. This,
yeah.
That's just, yeah.
But to kind of build on that, I also don't have any problem with somebody who genuinely wants to adopt a child. It's always the context. So if you take that picture of a child and you're, oh, I wish I could adopt you, and you're on holiday and you know fully well that you have no plans of adopting a child, then that's very condescending.
That's very condescending.
That's very condescending.
So if I get into a conversation with somebody, right, whether they come to me or I just intervene,
Yeah.
I always say, just imagine the other way around, okay? Imagine a black woman, and nicely dressed, okay, very nicely dressed, you know, black tourist, black woman, somewhere in, whether it's the States, France, Germany, I don't know, Australia, okay, standing in front of 6 half-naked white children, lifting one of them up, then putting them down, dusting her hands, and writing underneath, oh my God, so cute, all these white little children, I wish I could adopt them all. You know, usually that does everything you need to, I think, say.
Yeah.
They generally try to imagine that. They would equally be outraged. You would equally think like, how dare you?
How dare you? So I think we're just going to round up white saviorism in the context of volunteering. And it's safe to say that we've ended in a very grey area, meaning that there is no right or wrong concretely. It's all about the context. It's more acceptable if it's a community that you're volunteering in, if it's people that you have more than just a 5-minute encounter with, and if consent is taken, and if it's a decent picture, and if you're portraying as well in what way they've touched your life, because you gain much more from them than they do from you. So I think in those contexts, it's more acceptable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I would also say, to even address the actual name of saviorism, nobody goes anywhere in the world for however long and saves anybody. I've spent a year in this project and I don't think I have saved anybody.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I've even slightly touched anybody's life in an entire year. People sometimes go for a month. So that's really important for anybody, whether white, black or yellow. If you go somewhere to work on a social project around the world, you're not changing anybody's life. Temporarily, you might help them, or you might be able to assist in something, depending what you do, temporarily. But you're not going to save anybody. That's just to address the actual word of it, right?
Okay. Let's move on to white tourism in Africa.
Right.
It's more and more common now to see a lot of these sort of images of, you know, white people who go for tourism in Africa, and mixed in between their safari holidays is mostly always the half-naked poor locals and their huts. Why is there a need for that?
I might look at it slightly differently there. If you think of it from a touristy point of view, something while there's a lot of stories around it, of course. Some of them, of course, are more on the negative, like poverty side and so forth. But of course, the whole safari, the different tribal things. You know, I mean, there's a certain myth and knowledge around some of these things. For example, the movie Shaka Zulu is very well known. So a lot of you might have heard about this whole the Zulu warriors in South Africa. It's very mythical, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, when you go the same way, if somebody visits any other part of the world, anything that you're not used to and that is new to you, right?
Okay.
You have a tendency, of course, especially for a holiday, to capture that moment because you've just never seen that.
Okay,
right?
I agree with what you're saying, and you've actually given a few examples that make sense. Like safari. A safari is very much linked to Africa.
Yeah.
Typically or traditionally,
100%.
right? So if you're going there and you're taking pictures, that's fine. That's you.
Yeah.
That's animals. Nobody expects you to consent a giraffe.
Sure.
That's understandable. Okay. When you talk about the cultures and all the tribes, that's exciting. Even I would take pictures of Maasai warriors or Zulu warriors or all these tribes in the different African countries that are different from my own culture in Nigeria.
Yeah.
I understand that. And most of the time, these people understand that they make up part of the tourist attraction. It's mutual. The pictures I'm specifically talking about is the children that are, you know, improperly dressed appear to be very poor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? With their huts and their detached houses and like literally the picture of poverty. In a tourist context, why do you need to take those pictures and post them on social media?
I lived in Brazil when I was 16, even before South Africa, right? It was the very first time I actually was confronted with proper poverty because of the favelas in Brazil.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And I took pictures at the time. That was completely unheard of. The space they used to live, like I think Rocinha in Rio de Janeiro hosts something like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but about 100,000, 150,000 people on a tiny hill. It was shocking to me passing the, what's that floating village called in Lagos that you pass on the bridge? Again, some of you guys can help me out, please. I forgot the name. No, that's every time. Now, I'm not taking a picture anymore, of course, because I've been many, many times to Lagos. But every time I pass it, it is, impressive in that sense. Obviously, it's not really in a very
positive.
You know what I mean when I say impressive? I mean it in a way like it is. I mean, it's so huge, and it's people live there, and it's incredible. Imagine somebody who visits it for the very first time. They would have never seen anything like this. So I can see how this is for a lot of people. You're just so so new and so foreign at the time that in that moment, I guess they would like to capture it, right? It's one thing as a tourist to just take a picture, okay? And even there, it depends. Right, I've seen some very despicable pictures of literally completely naked children in a river. Right, in South Africa, for example, there were children bathing in a river, literally, and I see a group of like 5, 6 old white tourists all taking pictures. That was ridiculous. That was disgusting. I thought that was like in a zoo.
Yeah. Okay.
To give you one example, that is completely unacceptable, regardless of your intention of what you do with the picture. That is not acceptable. This is our example. Several things. The image itself, the context was wrong. Half-naked children, clearly very poor, kind of almost begging her to be carried, right?
Yeah.
Then even the actions then, because it was a video ultimately, right?
Yeah.
Lifting them up, dusting your hand, right?
Yeah.
Then she decides to post it. That adds a whole nother, for me, critical difference, right?
Okay.
You now share it with the world, and then what she wrote.
The caption.
Do you understand the kind of the steps?
Yeah.
When you pass certain areas, because they're part of the country, again, that's in my view okay. If you don't invade anybody's private space, and I've seen this as well, people just randomly walk into somebody's house. Like, why do you assume that's okay? Just because maybe yes, they're not very well off, but why do you just think it's just okay to walk in somebody's compound, literally randomly?
Yeah.
It's like, no, you can like knock, you can ask,
Yeah.
So there are barriers. But if you're on a public road somewhere, okay, you're driving past somewhere, you're walking past something,
and maybe the style of the house intrigues you,
who
or
knows
maybe
what
it's
it
a
is.
hut that you've not seen.
Or maybe that group of men, I remember there's some really cool images, I thought, very impressive, and not in a negative or condescending way. A group of men like sitting in front of some huts, doing like very traditional Zulu beer brewing, like not for tourists, real, this was real. Or eating like they just killed a cow, they were having like a big cow or something, like, these were images for me, or scenes or, context that for me I wanted to capture. I thought it was impressive, I thought it was interesting. So I think for me really, when it comes to the tourism piece, I think it's a little bit more gray area if you want. I think a couple of things, of course, there's something called privacy.
Yeah.
So always think also like what you would do back in your own place, right? Behave that way.
Yeah.
Don't invade people's privacy. There are limits, of course, when it comes to, kind of naked people or in very personal moments, don't do that. And again, for me, it's also again for how you then position or present that image. If you were to post it or share it with people, friends of yours, what do you say? Because that image of, for example, men sitting around eating, half a cow or something, you could put 5 different captions under that, and it would give a very different impression
each time. Yeah. To put it out there, I am definitely not against anybody going from the West to Africa to volunteer. Karibu, welcome. Welcome to Mother Africa. We welcome you with open arms. That being said, please check yourself before you even make that trip, because the white saviorism that everyone's talking about actually comes with, it's like a preconceived notion before you even get on that flight. You thinking already, well, I'm much better than these people. I'm much better than anyone who is here, and I'm coming to save them. Maybe not literally, maybe in other words, not literally I'm coming to save them.
I don't think they think they're better than them, but the problem is they do think they're coming to save children.
Okay.
Do you understand? I don't think, personally, I didn't, and everybody I met, it's not like they really genuinely felt that I'm a better person than you.
Okay.
But what they did feel is this idea like, wow, I'm here, like, I'm going to change your life now.
Yeah.
Just listen to my advice,
Although that might come from a good place.
Yeah, it does, but...
The way that it makes you, that thought alone, the way that it makes you act is in a way that 100% perpetuates a negative stereotype.
Yeah.
The stereotype that we're trying to get rid of.
Yeah.
The stereotype of what's in the American media. The stereotype that makes your president color countries. Like
not even
that,
just in America, by the way.
Not just... That's the most obvious one, actually.
Of course.
So those are the stereotypes that we, as Africans, want to get rid of. By wanting to get rid of these negative stereotypes, we're not automatically saying that we're rich. We're not automatically saying that we don't need humanitarian aid. And we're not automatically saying that we don't need volunteers.
No.
We're just saying come, but also respect our culture, respect us as humans.
You always imagine, how would I behave if it was in back home where I'm from?
Yeah.
And, if I would just turn it around, simply speaking from a kind of color point of view, right? I mean, because that's what it's at the end of the day about. There's a reason why it's called white saviorism. Just turn it around. How would you feel if it was the other way around? Yeah. And that already helps you check in many, many different situations whether something is acceptable or not. If you do those two things.
So for a naive white person who's going for the first time, what's your advice?
No, I think the key that you said before is about understand that yes, you're gonna hopefully make some great experiences and see new things, but if you are there as a volunteer, you will get more out of it. You're not going to save anybody, regardless of how long you stay.
Okay.
You are there to meet new people, to gain experience. Okay. And and you are ultimately taking more out of this than anybody else. You are not saving anybody when you volunteer.
Okay.
That's, I think, the key sentence to address saviorism. You're not saving.
Okay. Well, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, another important reason to get rid of all of these stereotypes that's continuously perpetuated by the media is because it subconsciously affects the way that you relate to other people, to a certain race, and that instigates or exaggerates racism.
Of course, yeah.
So, I mean, this is what it all boils down to. Racial equality. Yeah. And how can you achieve racial equality when you already believe that a certain race is poor?
For me, actually, the most important thing, that if you have the right mindset from the get-go, you actually start realizing, because otherwise you're blinded to not see this, but you actually realize the amazing human nature of people there, which in many regards is so much more interesting and so much, heartwarming than in most other countries that I've been to, certainly. As I said, the resilience, the joy, the openness that a lot of the families have, regardless of where they are on the social ladder. There's a warmth when it comes to family and friends, the way you treat each other, completely different in a very, very positive way to, for example, in Europe, right? Yeah. So that is something that I've learned throughout my stays, for example, and I've tried not to bring back respecting elders. Fortunately, my family, we were, I would say we took very good care of our grandparents, but, that is not necessarily something that is very, at least, prominent in Germany, at least. Right? It's like, do I have to see grandma now? Like, I don't want to go, and like, that's not something you can ever say in most, at least, African cultures. Your grandparents are like, they're the kings and queens of the whole family. You do not dare to say anything against, So
there's so much beauty.
So much beauty and incredible, I think, things that a lot of people that come there and visit could take away from it if they were open and accepting that there is something they can learn. Other than just nature, which is beautiful, and or poverty.
So in light of what you've just said, that makes sense when it comes to the context of whatever you decide to post on social media. So it could be a picture that obviously doesn't show like mansions and Lamborghinis. It could be a picture that doesn't show like tarred roads or anything like that. But as long as your caption is not the poverty and the need for adoption, which insinuates that you already feel sorry for them, you can talk about the way that they're overjoyed and running around playing without worrying about anything, and all of the amazing music, the traditional dances, the moves, the vibe, everything, all of that, that is positivity without taking away that volunteers still need to go and play their part. In light of what recently happened on social media, the negative context of the picture that was posted, I wanted to say a huge thank you to all of the support that we received. I didn't do this for me, and contrary to what anybody thinks, I wasn't doing this to serve any purpose or any agenda. I was not sending people after anyone. I wasn't intentionally threatening anyone or didn't go with any intention to bully. I used my platform to prove to all of us Africans who are affected by this stereotype that when we come together, change happens. And the change in this context was that picture was eventually taken down. Everything else that happened around is noise. The only thing I achieved was that the picture was taken down. That's a win for every African who saw that photograph and that video and was offended by it. Well done. Let's keep in mind to fight with integrity. So I do not condone and I do not support in any way death threats that were eventually sent to this influencer in question. God is my witness that I did not send anybody to threaten anybody. I think a lot of you who were emotionally affected by this, displayed your emotion in a different way. Death threats, cursing out people, it is not necessary, because oftentimes your message is lost in that aggression. Your message is lost. People spend the time talking about how you approached it rather than the actual message. So please, no death threats, none of that. But the movement is on. When I see it, I will call it. I'm not under any illusion, okay, that I alone is gonna be the spokesperson for every negatively stereotyped African. No. Shame on me if I see something that's wrong and I keep quiet about it. Shame on me. Moving forward, thank you so much for coming together. Okay, coming together to achieve something great.
Absolutely.
So we're going to end this conversation here. This is probably not going to be the last time that we visit this topic, but I think it's a great start, and we would 100% love to hear your thoughts about this very important and sensitive conversation.
Yeah, please, from everybody as well. Don't be shy, okay? Be of course, civil, but please, everybody should feel free to comment their thoughts and their opinions on this, and we will be very keen, I think, to hear back from you. And if, of course, we see there's an opportunity again to, sit down, talk about it again, maybe from a particular angle, or maybe somebody has particular questions around this, I think we're happy to, address that again.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.